Hello everyone, welcome to Crypto Basics Coach podcast. I'm Marco. I'm here to help people navigate this topic so as to benefit from the opportunity this new technology provides and not get distracted or put off from the nonsense there is out there about crypto. Anything and everything presented and discussed, whether here or in our sessions, is of an educational nature and should never be taken as financial advice. Always do your due diligence and consult professionals before making any final decisions. Hi guys, hope you're well. As promised in my little 1-2 minute videos that I do on, you can follow me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and also Snipverse. Snipverse is a social platform that's actually built on blockchain and pays for listening, watching, and so forth. Something you probably should check out. Anyway, I promised I'd go a little bit deeper into these data centers for two reasons. One is it, again, for education, so that when you do see announcements of major outages due to a data center, perhaps you can discern some awareness of how these data centers are built and, does it sound a little all too fishy, like the one we had over a week ago about the CME. And secondly, it's also important if you're investing or if you're trading, you're going to be using platforms, whether they're trading platforms, whether they're exchanges, etc. So you want to also understand as part of your due diligence, where are these people keeping their infrastructure? And perhaps it could add a few questions to your due diligence list when you're looking into investments. So let's get into it. It's going to be a little geeky compared to normal, but I'm sure you can find it useful. So for starters, there are different categories of data centers, and essentially I think they're numbered 1 to 5. It's been a while, but essentially you're looking for the better the data center, the higher the uptime capability of that data center. Okay, so if you've got an application that isn't as important, you might go for a lower data center. They might offer, say, 97, 98% uptime. And I know you might think, gee, that sounds really high. But for mission critical stuff, especially around finance, could be medical, could be also drilling for energy, etc. Some of these applications actually do need to stay up 99.999% of the time, okay? And so data centers are categorized with different ratings. Sometimes the same data center may have different areas, which again are categorized to different levels so that you as a customer can pick the appropriate area depending on the uptime that you're requiring. Okay, so the first thing is there are different data centers. Second thing, most data centers, let's look at it from a power perspective. Okay, so most data centers are going to have multiple power sources. Okay, that's pretty obvious. Otherwise, if one fails, everything shuts down. So typically they'll have more than one source from the street. And from that, what I mean is physical cables coming in from the street, typically from different power energy companies. Okay, so that they've got some redundancy from that perspective. Next thing they have is they've got backup generators. Okay, never know. Something could happen out in the street where some guy in a backhoe carves up, and trust me, this happens more than you realize. They might dig up a stretch of the street and pull up both power cables. So you've got backup generators, okay, typically diesel. They've also got, in some instances, UPS. That stands for uninterrupted power supplies, okay, batteries, in other words. There's also what's called DRUPS systems, DRUPS. What these things are is that they're massive flywheels that essentially create momentum, and they're usually constantly turning over thanks to the main power. And they give you some time, 15, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to essentially slow down. But by that time, what's expected is that the generators have taken over. Okay, so again, you've got uninterrupted power supply to your computers. And then you go into cooling, which is supposed to be the reason this data center that caused the CME to fail. Clearly, you've got multiple, sometimes even 3 different cooling systems with plenty of redundancies, plenty of power redundancies, plenty of capabilities. Each part of the data center would have multiple inlets from these different cooling systems. So again, you've got redundancy there. And then something that I didn't go into as much in the videos I did during the week is you would then, inside the actual computer room, where you've got your computer racks, each computer rack has dual power supplies. So any equipment that's connected to that rack can be physically connected to different power supplies. And that goes on to say that most equipment, especially the the high uptime one, they have multiple power supplies within them. Okay, so just imagine your laptop with 2 power supplies. And so, of course, you'd connect one to one power source, and you'd connect the other power supply to the other power source. And so you've got independent power going to the equipment, and the equipment itself can run off 2 different power sources. Then what have you got? Well, at an application level, you've got things called virtual servers. If they are physical, the physical ones would have the dual power supplies. Virtual servers is essentially, imagine your computer at home and you're able to actually run 3 or 4 different servers on that computer. They're totally separate, but they're sharing the equipment. They're sharing the power supply, the CPU, etc., etc. On top of that, you've got something called SAN, which is essentially storage that's provided to these servers. And this is like a massive storage array, and it's farming off different storage to different application servers. That storage device itself has got redundancy built into it. If certain disks fail, other ones take over. They've got disaster recovery facilities, etc. Why? Well, again, any server requires storage, and so the storage devices can be segregated and provide storage as needed. There's also something called mirroring. Okay, this is where essentially you have 2 servers that are constantly essentially making each other the same as the other one, so that if one falls over, the other one can take over straight away, no problem, and you don't get any downtime. You have load balancing. Again, if one server starts to get too much traffic, you either introduce more CPU, more storage, or potentially an additional server can start taking over some of the processing, hence load balancing. Again, all designed to keep the service up and running. You've then got hot and cold setups. These are situations where perhaps at another site you've got the same servers, but they're not actually mirroring, they're not up and running all the time, but it might take half an hour or so to get the data up and running. And then, so those ones are not in what's called a cold state. They're not up and running as your main production ones. And as I've just mentioned, you've also got most data centers will have a failover data center, which is another data center with the same equipment. Everything is set up exactly the same, but generally speaking, it's in a location most likely more than 30 kilometers away from the main one. Okay, for obvious reasons. Things could happen, storms, earthquakes, who knows what could happen to one data center. I mean, there's even been cases where light planes have run into, have essentially crashed into a data center. Okay, I know that might sound quite unbelievable, but there are some instances, and when we've had to develop disaster recovery plans, these are the things that we have to take into consideration. So clearly, you don't want your second site being somewhere close to your first site, because the element that's causing the first site to go down may very well affect the second one. Okay. And so usually what a business does is they'll sit down, or a customer will sit down and work out, right, I need to categorize my application, my function. What is it that I'm providing to my customers? Does it need to be up 99.999% or could it be less? And once that's decided, in most instances, if it is 99.99, it's considered what's called mission critical. If it's mission critical, then you're going to select the highest and the best grade of data center, equipment, redundancy, resiliency, methodologies, etc. And you would include those in your disaster recovery plan. So here's a quick question. Do you think that any application or platform or system that is tied to a global financial function, like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, like NASDAQ, like the S&P, or any overseas equivalents, okay, wouldn't they be taking advantage of everything that I've just mentioned? Wouldn't they be selecting the 99.999% uptime? And usually, probably, I'll be honest with you, probably out of greedy reasons that they're trying to make maximum profit they can. Not because they're necessarily trying to provide you and me the best service, okay? But they've got large institutions that they need to answer to. All right, so if they don't look after their backyard, well, people get replaced, companies get replaced, and potentially providers get replaced. Okay, so this is pretty serious and pretty important. So whether it's a trading desk or a trading floor within a particular company, these financial applications are considered very, very serious, and everyone goes to great trouble to making sure that they stay up no matter what. So this is the background as to why I put out that video going, I'm suspicious. A cooling tower, really, for something as important to the CME, and especially at the time that it happened with regards to silver pricing. Okay. Now, you can also take this further. Everything that I've just mentioned is typically what a individual business who may have their own servers, their own storage at a data center. This is the sort of stuff that they would look at. If you go the other alternative, which is, well, we're not managing all of our stuff. We just go to cloud. We're paying Azure or Amazon for or Microsoft for these services. Then those cloud providers have got the same system. They've got the same technology running in the background. So they too will ask you, well, what grade of uptime do you need? What grade of resiliency do you need? Does your disaster recovery plan expect us to just mirror things over, or do we have a few hours to get things up and running? These are normal conversations that you would have with your cloud provider, and you would pick the appropriate service, and you would most likely pay for the appropriate. Obviously, the higher the uptime, the higher the cost. So the cloud providers use the exact same sort of systems. They have a couple of additional tools for making things stay up as well. But whether you're doing it yourself with your own equipment in a data center or whether you go to cloud, at the end of the day, same principles apply. Identify your uptime, identify what your business needs are, and then set up the infrastructure accordingly. So, in summary, the above should give you an idea of, well, when I say the above, because I'm going with my notes, but basically everything that I've just mentioned, okay, is a business needs to, if you're going to be dealing with a business, whether you're trading, whether you've got some investments, Autobots, whatever that you've got going on, okay, it wouldn't hurt for you to understand how are they structured in the background so that it gives you a bit of an understanding of, well, how resilient is their system. Okay, a lot of people don't even think about this side. They just assume that the service is going to stay up because these days with society the way it is, we just expect services to work, okay, and not really understand the structure and the fundamentals and the foundations of how some of these services are actually provided. So hopefully that gives you another avenue of your due diligence when you're looking at setting things up. You want to look into these and understand. Now, clearly, if you're dealing with, country stock exchanges and so forth, of course, you're expecting that they would be, paying and have set up the right systems in the background. That's why this outage of the CME is really suspicious to me. Hope you got something out of that. I gave you a week off last week. No homework last week. Well, that changes this week. Back into it. This time, what I want you to do is have a look at what is the programmable component of a CBDC. And again, if you've been following me on the other social channels, I did a CBDC video just a couple of days ago. It may not have posted, so I'll forgive you if you haven't seen that one yet. But go in and have a look at what does programmable mean when you're talking about a CBDC. And most importantly, are stable coins any different, or do they have the same function? Anyway, hope I've hurt your head and you've got something out of this. This is a side of me you don't get to see too often because I've been focusing more on crypto and finance and structures and stuff I know, but this is some of the discipline that I bring to bear on these markets and this education. Hope you got something out of it. As always, take it easy and talk to you again in another week. Look after yourselves. Cheers. If you found this information helpful and are interested in a more hand-holding approach while navigating this complex industry, please visit cryptobasicscoach.com, that's basics with an S, and book a session. The first 30-minute session is free, and we can get to know each other, talk about what your aims are, what you're looking to do, and how I might be able to possibly help. I've helped people get started, set up exchange accounts, wallets, DeFi platforms, and general knowledge. Look forward to speaking with you. Cheers.